my name is Emily Shia, and I am a generative artist. I started coding as a career. I was a software engineer for many years. I started making art with code sometime around 2015 or 2016. I was born in China and I immigrated to the US and have always kind of tried to find a way to reconcile these different parts of my identity, being like an immigrant, having all that culture behind me, bringing that into like an American context, and then also being a child of like the digital age. But I was inspired by a lot of Chinese artwork, a lot of Japanese woodblock, and wanting to bring in that aesthetic. And this idea of the Qilin started to uncover itself for me. The Qilin is this beautiful creature in Chinese mythology. It's like a single creature with different body parts from various animals, kind of all in one. It's an elusive creature, like it appears very rarely, and typically during like auspicious times. This shape-shifting form of the Qilin, it conveys a lot about folklore and mythology in general. Folklore is passed down from generation to generation, and it's all ever shifting, right? Like these stories kind of change from generation to generation, even from person to person. The details warp, your interpretation of it kind of gets bent a little bit. There's this idea of memory that I'm interested in as well. And memory to me is this extremely elusive thing. Like everything feels kind of distorted, displaced, kind of like almost there in your mind. And there's something really beautiful about that. You can never quite fully grasp it again, as if you were living in the moment. But you also, your memories, you don't let go of them, right? And so they're always there in your head, but it's so vague and amorphous. And I just love this idea of kind of this amorphous nature, this elusive, like vague nature that I find so beautiful, that's inherent in memory and tradition and mythology. And I wanted to reflect that, right? Like this Memories of Qilin project is fundamentally about that. And so that's all reflected in the aesthetic of the piece as well, right? Like each piece kind of looks elusive. Each piece, like you feel like you can barely make out a form. And when you finally do, like just as it crystallizes in front of you, it kind of like slips away because it's not quite there. Each piece is different from person to person, right? And there's this idea of a collective mythology that gets created out of the entire series. Sometimes there are like pieces that have more consensus around it. For example, the roaring lion, Memories of Qilin number 808, looks like pretty undisputedly to people like a roaring lion's head. But then there's a lot of pieces that are left up to interpretation, and that's kind of the beauty of the series. Like you're really meant to interpret these forms in front of you and to project a part of yourself into the work. And that like is something that kind of brings us all together. At a very high level, what happens is there are a series of primitive shapes that are dispersed throughout the screen, depending on which trait that you got, right, based on the blockchain hash. And each of these are perturbed in a simple physics simulation, resulting in this organic looking form. And then each of them are further stretched, distorted, and morphed using a Perlin noise field. And then from there, I applied like a custom masking algorithm that separated each of the shapes that were formed by shapes intersecting so that they could each have their own patterns and colors applied to them. There's also a lot of heuristics that come into place at this step to make sure that it generally looks good compositionally. And then, of course, like the patterns get generated on the fly based on the palette that got selected for that seed. Each palette would have its own patterns and colors that are pre-picked by me. I spent a lot of time fine-tuning those colors. And then, of course, the border gets put into place and the underlying texture gets dropped on top of everything. And then if you have that trait, you end up getting those splotches that look like, coffee stains or whatever. In terms of, East Asian heritage, I played a lot with patterns that were inspired. For example, there's the wave pattern, which is a symbol of good luck. There's like hexagonal patterns that are very common in Chinese culture that, for example, might symbolize longevity. The texturing kind of lends to this time-worn feel. And I think that contributes to this nostalgia that is inherent around mythology and folklore. You're kind of fighting against what computers are best at, which is precision and grids and straight, hard edges. To go against that, you really have to get creative.
Memories was one that just played with forms and textures in a way that felt completely innovative to me because it had this like organic compositional expressiveness to it that for someone who is not a coder, it kind of blew my mind from like a technical standpoint.
I was like, I need to see the functions that you created for these patterns, for all these different patterns. Like, I need to know how you did this because it's incredible and just done so, it looks so effortless. And spoiler alert, it's not effortless. There's so much that goes behind it, but even then, like, her code was so beautiful. It was also organized and compact, and I just was such a fan, like just such a fan.
The way that people would see animals and like the lion and other sort of, vestiges inside these shapes, just that to me speaks of nature. It speaks of like organic qualities.
Seeing that people found the emergence such a compelling part of the project was a success. Like, it was a metric of success for me. Like, the project intended to do that, and people received it that way.
I just want to see like the human inside the work, and I think that project, I think it's just sort of, it's like fluid expression that it displays is one of the first ones that's like quite successful at like showing that hand behind the artist at work.
I really do feel like Memories of Qilin was one of the first projects that we had an artist show us who they were with their code. We got a glimpse into her culture, into how she was raised, the stories that made her who she is today.
Yeah, I mean, I look back on it and it is an extremely meaningful project for me. And I will continue to make meaningful projects for myself as an artist. But I really think that this one became like the biggest inflection point for me.